The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the high school gymnasium. Everyone turned to stare as my ex-wife's words hung in the air. "We all know why our marriage really ended, don't we, David?" Her new husband, a plastic surgeon with perfect teeth and a Rolex, smirked beside her. I stood frozen, humiliation burning through me as former classmates whispered. That's when the gymnasium doors swung open and Elijah Blackwood, tech billionaire and my impossible-to-please boss, walked in. Nobody knew I worked for him. I was just the invisible executive assistant to the man Forbes had named most influential under 40, 3 years running. But the way he headed straight toward me changed everything. If you've ever felt like life kicked you when you were already down, only to surprise you with something unexpected, hit that like button and subscribe. This story might just remind you that sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, life has a way of showing up with second chances you never saw coming. 10 hours earlier, I had been standing in my bathroom, attempting to knot my tie while my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, sat cross-legged on the toilet seat, swinging her legs back and forth. "Daddy, why do you look so scared?" "It's just old friends, right?" she asked, her head tilted to one side, brown curls falling across her forehead. I sighed, abandoning the tie altogether and stuffing it into my pocket. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes when grown-ups haven't seen each other for a long time, they get nervous." What I didn't tell her was that I was terrified. 15 years after graduation, I was returning to face my former classmates as a divorced single dad who had failed to become the successful architect everyone had expected. Instead, I was an executive assistant, albeit to one of the most powerful men in the tech industry, but nobody knew that part. All they would see was a man who hadn't lived up to his potential. "Is Mommy going to be there?" Lily asked, her voice smaller now. I nodded, kneeling down to her level. "Yes, honey. Mom and Richard will be there." "Will you guys fight again?" My heart clenched. "No, Lil. I promise we won't fight." The babysitter arrived at 6, and I kissed Lily goodbye, promising to tell her all about the boring grown-up party in the morning. As I backed my 10-year-old Honda out of the driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from my ex-wife, Caroline. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Richard and I have some news to share." My stomach nodded. Caroline always had news these days: a new house, a new car, a new vacation property. All things I couldn't provide when we were married, working 60-hour weeks at an architecture firm that eventually laid me off during the recession. All things her new husband could give her without blinking. The high school looked exactly the same: red brick exterior, trophy cases lining the entrance hall, the faint smell of floor cleaner and teenage angst. I checked in at the welcome table, where a woman I vaguely recognized pinned a name tag to my chest and directed me toward the gymnasium. David Chen. Oh my God, it's been forever. I turned to see Jessica Winters, former head cheerleader and current pharmaceutical sales rep according to her name tag. She hugged me like we'd been best friends, though we'd barely spoken in high school. "How are you? Still designing buildings? I remember you were going to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright or something." I forced a smile. Life took a different turn. I'm in executive management now. Not a complete lie, I did manage an executive's entire life. That's amazing. And how's Caroline? I heard you two split up. Before I could answer, the gymnasium doors opened, and Caroline walked in with Richard. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, and diamonds glittered at her ears and throat. Richard's hand rested possessively on the small of her back as they surveyed the room. Jessica waved them over enthusiastically. "Caroline. Richard. Come say hi to David." I wanted to disappear. Instead, I stood my ground as my ex-wife approached, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "David," she said coolly. "You look, well. You too, Caroline, I replied, nodding at Richard. Good to see you again. Richard shook my hand with too much force. David. Still driving that old Honda? I saw it in the parking lot. Classic. I felt my face heat up. It gets me where I need to go. Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. How's Lily? Still having those anxiety issues? She's doing great, actually. Her therapist says she's making excellent progress. I didn't mention that the therapist's bills were stretching my budget to the breaking point. Well, that's good to hear. Though I still think she'd benefit from that private school I mentioned. The waiting list is long, but Richard knows the headmaster. We've discussed this, Caroline. Lily's happy at her current school. Happy isn't the same as thriving, David. But then, you've always been content with, adequate. The barb stung, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly why I'd been dreading tonight. Can I get anyone a drink? Richard interjected, clearly enjoying the tension. They have an open bar. David, beer? Or something stronger? I'll get my own, thanks, I said, excusing myself to escape to the bar at the far end of the gymnasium. As I waited for my whiskey, I scanned the room. Everyone seemed to have achieved exactly what they'd set out to do after high school. Mark Daniels, former quarterback, was now a successful sports agent. Emma Lee had become the doctor she'd always wanted to be. And there was Caroline, who'd married me believing in my potential, only to leave when that potential failed to materialize into the lifestyle she'd expected. The night progressed painfully slowly. I made small talk with former classmates, dodging questions about my career and deflecting inquiries about my divorce. I was standing alone by the photo display when Caroline approached again, this time without Richard. You're hiding, she said, sipping champagne. Just reminiscing, I replied, gesturing to the old photos. She studied me for a moment. You know, I never wanted things to end the way they did between us. Didn't you? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. You seemed pretty clear about what you wanted when you left. That's not fair, David. I supported you for years while you chased a dream that wasn't working out. I waited for you to make changes, to adapt, but you just kept going down the same path. I was trying to provide for our family. By working at a failing firm? By refusing to network or look for better opportunities? Richard says. I don't care what Richard says, I interrupted. Not everything is about money, Caroline. Her eyes flashed. No, but when you can't pay for your daughter's therapy or save for her college education, it becomes about security. Something you never understood. People nearby were beginning to notice our heated conversation. I lowered my voice. I've always taken care of Lily. By working as someone's assistant? Caroline scoffed. Don't look surprised. Richard has friends in the industry. We know you're basically a glorified secretary for Elijah Blackwood. My blood ran cold. I'd been careful to keep my job at Blackwood Technologies private, partly out of professional discretion and partly out of pride. Being an executive assistant wasn't what I'd dreamed of, but it paid the bills and gave me flexibility for Lily. More importantly, I was good at it. There's nothing wrong with my job, I said quietly. Except it's not what you promised me when we got married. You said you'd be designing skyscrapers by now, not fetching coffee for some tech bro. Richard appeared at her side with fresh champagne. Everything okay here? Caroline took the glass. Just catching up. Actually, David, this is perfect timing. We wanted to share our news with you personally. My stomach dropped. News? Richard put his arm around Caroline's waist. We're moving to London. My practice is opening an international branch, and I'll be heading it up. We leave next month. London? I repeated stupidly. But what about Lily? Our custody arrangement? Caroline's expression softened slightly. That's what we need to discuss. We think it would be best if Lily came with us. The room seemed to tilt. You want to take my daughter to another country? It's an incredible opportunity for her, Richard interjected. The best schools, cultural experiences, travel throughout Europe. Things you simply can't provide. She's 7 years old. She needs stability, not cultural experiences. She needs her father. Caroline sighed. We're not trying to cut you out, David. You could visit, and there's always video calls. But be realistic, your apartment barely has room for her now, and you work long hours for a man who's notorious for demanding his staff be available 24/7. I make it work, I insisted. I've never missed a school event or a doctor's appointment. And that's commendable, Richard said condescendingly. But is that really enough? Don't you want more for her? People were definitely staring now. I could feel their eyes on us, hear the whispers. Poor David. Couldn't keep his wife, can't provide for his kid. Now he's making a scene. Caroline lowered her voice. We're not asking for your permission, David. Our lawyers have already drafted the papers to modify the custody agreement. Given your circumstances, we believe any judge will see that Lily's best interests lie with us. The champagne glass I'd been holding slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, shattering against the floor. The crash silenced the room. We all know why our marriage really ended, don't we, David? Caroline said loudly, no longer bothering to keep our conversation private. You were never willing to do what it takes to succeed. You settled for mediocrity, and I couldn't build a life on that. Richard's smirk widened as he surveyed the damage, both the broken glass and my broken dignity. The whispers around us grew louder. That's when the gymnasium doors swung open. Elijah Blackwood stood in the entrance, commanding attention without saying a word. At 42, he had the lean physique of someone who ran marathons for fun, which he did, and the sharp gaze of someone who could see through any pretense, which he could. His tailored suit probably cost more than my car, but he wore it with the casual confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The room fell silent as people recognized him. Elijah Blackwood wasn't just wealthy, he was a tech visionary who had revolutionized artificial intelligence and renewable energy. His face had been on the cover of Time magazine twice. And he was walking straight toward me. David, he said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. I stared at him in confusion. We had no plans to meet here, I hadn't even told him about the reunion. Before I could respond, he turned to Caroline and Richard, extending his hand. You must be Caroline. David's told me about you. His tone was pleasant but cool. And you are? Richard straightened, clearly starstruck. Richard Winters, plastic surgeon. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm a huge admirer of your work. Elijah nodded politely before turning back to me. I hope I'm not interrupting, but we have that situation with the Singapore deal. I need your input before we proceed. Caroline's eyes widened. Singapore deal? Yes, Elijah said casually. David's been instrumental in our expansion into the Asian markets. His architectural background gives him unique insights into cultural design elements that our competitors miss. He glanced at me. That's why I've been trying to convince him to head up our new urban development division. His modesty is admirable but becoming problematic. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. What was he doing? Richard looked between us, confused. I thought, aren't you his assistant? Elijah laughed. David assists me with certain matters, yes. Just as I assist him with others. That's how partnerships work. He checked his watch. David, do you need a few minutes, or shall we discuss this over dinner? The jet is waiting, but I told them we might be delayed. The jet. As if we regularly flew private together. Caroline's face had lost its smugness, replaced by uncertainty. You never mentioned any of this, David. There's a lot I don't mention, Caroline, I found myself saying. Some of us prefer to let our work speak for itself. Elijah smiled slightly. Well said. He turned to address the now captivated room. I apologize for stealing David away from your reunion, but billion-dollar deals wait for no one. It was a pleasure meeting you all. As we walked toward the exit, whispers erupted behind us. I could feel Caroline and Richard staring at our backs, their carefully constructed narrative about me crumbling. Once outside in the cool night air, I turned to Elijah. What was that about? He straightened his cuffs. That was about not letting people define you by their limited perception. He studied my face. Your ex-wife seems charming. I laughed despite myself. That's one word for her. I heard most of your conversation. They want to take your daughter to London? I nodded, the reality of the situation crashing back. They think they can provide a better life for her. And what do you think? I think Lily needs stability and love more than private schools and European vacations. But I'm afraid a judge might not see it that way. Elijah was quiet for a moment. Do you know why I hired you, David? The question caught me off guard. Because I was desperate enough to take the job. Because when I asked in your interview what your greatest achievement was, you didn't talk about buildings you designed or awards you'd won. You talked about teaching your daughter to ride a bike after she'd fallen 17 times. You said success wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up one more time than you fall. I remembered that interview. I'd been certain I'd blown it by getting personal instead of professional. I hired you, Elijah continued, because I needed someone who understood that persistence matters more than perfection. And in the 3 years you've worked with me, you've proven that instinct correct countless times. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is why I actually came tonight. I was going to leave it at your house, but your neighbor said you'd already left. I took the envelope cautiously. What is this? Open it. Inside was a contract. As I scanned the details, my breath caught. It was an offer for a new position, Director of Urban Integration for Blackwood Technologies' Sustainable Housing Initiative. The salary was triple what I currently made. I don't understand, I said, looking up at him. It's not charity, Elijah said firmly. It's recognition of the work you've already been doing. Those design suggestions you made for our Tokyo office? The sustainability modifications for the Seattle campus? You've been doing this job unofficially for months. I'm just making it official. I stared at the contract, thinking of what this would mean. Financial security. A home where Lily could have her own room. The ability to fight Caroline's custody modification. Why now? I asked. Elijah shrugged. The initiative launches next quarter. But the timing seems fortuitous, doesn't it? He nodded toward the school. Sometimes people need to be reminded that success isn't measured by others' yardsticks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the weekend to think about it, then give me your answer on Monday. And say you'll stop letting people like your ex-wife define your worth. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Elijah opened the door but paused before getting in. Oh, and David? There actually is a Singapore deal. The files are in your email. I'd value your perspective by Monday. As the car pulled away, I stood holding the contract, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Behind me, the gymnasium door opened, and Caroline stepped out. David? Her voice was hesitant. What was that about? I turned to face her, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time since our divorce. She wasn't a villain in my story, just someone who had wanted different things than I could provide at the time. That was about business, Caroline. Nothing that concerns you. He offered you a job, didn't he? A real position?